Well, I'm sorry, this is going to take a few minutes. This morning I was made aware of a Newsweek article that I want to address. Newsweek published on March the 15th of this year that Pope Leo XIV demanded a ceasefire in the Middle East. Now, in that speech, he said, "On behalf of the Christians in the Middle East and all men and women of goodwill, I appeal to those responsible for this conflict." He said ceasefire so that avenues for dialogue may be reopened. Violence can never lead to justice, stability, and peace that people are waiting for. End of the quote. Well, that's unfortunate. I would have hoped that the Pope would have avoided absolutes. He said violence can never lead to justice, stability, and the peace that people are waiting for. Well, the crucifixion of Jesus Christ was the most violent event imaginable, and that violence is the only thing that brought true justice, stability, and peace that the world longs for. I mean, if Rome had dialogued with Jesus and the Jewish council, we might have escaped violence at Calvary, but eternal damnation for every living person in history would have been a result. I thank God that Jesus endured violence so that you and I don't have to. Then on March 30th, another article from Newsweek reported that what the Pope said on Palm Sunday, just this past Sunday. And here's what it said. Speaking to tens of thousands of worshipers, the pontiff said Jesus cannot be used to justify violence, and cited a biblical passage saying that God will not listen to the prayers from those whose hands are full of blood. And the end of quote is there too. The passage is from Isaiah chapter 1, verse 15. It was from God to Judah originally to condemn their hypocrisy, specifically religious devotion dressed up in evil, violence, and unrepentant sin. Is America guilty of sin? Boy, you better believe it. But God calls Judah in verse 4 a sinful nation, a people laden with iniquity, offspring of evildoers, children who deal corruptly. He says they have forsaken the Lord. They have despised the Holy One of Israel. They are utterly estranged. And then he goes on in verse 7, God says this, "Your country lies desolate. Your cities are burned with fire. In your very presence, foreigners devour your land. It is desolate as overthrown by foreigners." Well, that sounds like Iran more than it sounds like America, at least not yet. So many people, like the Pope, confuse America with Israel. Listen to me. America is not his people. Israel is. In Isaiah chapter 1, God calls them that. His relationship with them is the whole reason why he refuses to hear their prayers. See, my children get it a whole lot harder from their daddy than somebody else's children whom I know. It's the same way with God's children. Newsweek said, Leo emphasized that Jesus rejected violence even at the moment of his arrest, reinforcing the biblical account in which Christ rebuked a follower for drawing a sword. The Pope said he did not arm himself, he did not defend himself, he didn't fight any war. The Pope said that, adding that Jesus instead revealed to God who always rejects violence. God always rejects violence? I mean, what about those people who came to the ark just after the doors had been shut, clawing to get their ways in, climbing up a tree with their children as the waters raised and their child dropped off that top limb? That's not a violent thing? I mean, look, drowning is a violent way to die when God is watching. God commanded Israel to wipe out civilizations all through the Old Testament. Oh, God is violent, but he's violent in a holy way that humanity is incapable of. The Pope says that violence is always prohibited for humans. The Bible clearly shows that those acting under God's explicit direction are justified in using violence. Here's what I'm saying. What God can do, God can authorize others to do. I appreciate the Pope's desire for peace, but such sophomoric comments show he's not ready for his position as pontiff. He's a politician, not a pope. He makes the same mistake as before in using Jesus' arrest and nonviolence as normative for every person in every instance. I Googled Does the Pope have security? End quote. Here was Google's response. Yes, the Pope has extensive 24/7 security provided primarily by the Pontifical Swiss Guard, an elite military unit established in 1506. While recognizable by their traditional Renaissance uniforms, the 135-member force is highly trained in modern combat, counterintelligence, and VIP protection. Sounds like do what I say, not what I do. Even Jesus and that sword the Pope spoke of comes to mind because it was Jesus who told Peter to sell his cloak and buy a sword, even if its only purpose was not to fight, but to give Rome a legitimate reason to arrest him. Let me address the bigger issue here. The right of Israel and the United States to wage war against Iran in the face of constant threats of annihilation is easily defended through just war tradition, the ethics of protection, and normative Jewish law regarding self-defense. My whole life, Iran has concealed its nuclear weapons program while regularly parading missiles where it's written on the side of the missiles, death to Israel, death to the United States. In such situations, it's riskier to ignore the threats than to act upon them. History demonstrates that failing to stop fanatics who announce their lethal intentions, just like Adolf Hitler in 1929, inevitably leads to a massive loss of innocent human life. Just war tradition, in that tradition, war is morally justified when waged by legitimate authority for a just cause, specifically to defend, to vindicate, or to restore public order, peace, and justice when those things are threatened. Hey man, blessed are the peacemakers. While just war theory insists that armed conflict must be a last resort, this principle does not demand that a nation passively wait to be struck first. 17th century legal theorist Hugo Grotius acknowledged the moral validity of the preemptive force, arguing that just war requires a presumption against injustice rather than a blind presumption against the use of force. Furthermore, modern interpretations, such as those found in the Catholic Catechism, clarify that while last resort means exhausting reasonable diplomatic efforts, the preventative strikes to limit catastrophic harm are entirely morally legitimate. Therefore, if Israel or the United States faces an imminent threat of attack from a regime that can't be deterred, they possess a moral responsibility to defend themselves preemptively. This right to prevent preemptive and defensive war is deeply rooted in Jewish theology. In Judaism, self-defense is primarily the underpinning principle for the sanctioned use of violence. The Torah makes a profound moral distinction between murdering, which is wrongly ending an innocent life, and killing. I tell people all the time, the Bible doesn't say, thou shalt not kill. The Bible says, thou shalt not murder. See, according to Jewish law, if an enemy approaches another with the intent to murder, striking down that aggressor is not considered an act of murder. It's a mitzvah, a commandment, because the attacker's legal or lethal intent means they have forfeited their status as an innocent life. The Christian moral tradition views the use of defensive force to stop evil as an act of charity or love. Early church fathers like St. Ambrose and St. Augustine argued that it is the strict moral obligation of the Christian love to defend and to protect the innocent. Failing to intervene to protect them is as much of a moral evil as causing the harm one's self. Modern ethicist Paul Ramsey expands on this framework, calling it the ethics of protection, asserting that true neighbor love requires a willingness to use force to disarm and incapacitate an aggressor in order to save victims. So building upon Augustine's concept of tranquillitas ordinis, the tranquility of order, Catholic scholar George Weigel argues that the United States has a distinct moral obligation to rid the world of terrorist organizations and to prevent rogue regimes from obtaining weapons of mass destruction. Through that lens, neutralizing Iran's nuclear capabilities and its state-sponsored terror networks is not an act of unwarranted aggression. It's a necessary step to ensure peace and secure it, to protect innocent life, and to establish a rightly ordered international community. So sorry, Pope, sometimes it is the right thing to do to man up with a little violence to ensure that a greater violence never comes.